You're ready to begin.
All right. Who's reading that motion?
Let's see. I think we need a call to order first, and then we'll read the motion. So you can bang us in.
All right, then I will call this meeting of the Jefferson Massachusetts Regional Library Board of Trustees, November 2022 to order.
Okay.
First item of business is remote participation confirmation.
Okay, so we just need a trustee to make a vote for Tony, who is choosing option A today.
I move that Tony Townsend's request to attend today's meeting of the JMRL Board remotely due to a temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition that prevents their physical attendance be approved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. And I see that we do have a quorum. Thank you. Thomas, I knew somebody was going to go to North.
Of course, the person who had probably talked the most frequently about it with David.
All right, first item of business is to take care of the minutes of the October meeting. Anybody have any comments, suggestions, additions, corrections? If not, can I have a motion to accept them as written?
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. At this point, we all have a pause to take comments from members of the public on any matters that may come before the board. Do we have anybody? We don't have anybody in person, it doesn't look like.
No, there are a few people watching remotely, so if anyone watching remotely would like to make public comment, you can use the raise hand function in Zoom to raise your hand now to be allowed to speak. Going once for any public comment from remote viewers. And twice. I think we have no public comment at this time.
Very good. Thank you, everybody.
I do have an announcement.
Yep.
I do have an announcement if you'd like to take one.
Yes, I was about to say that. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It's my pleasure to announce Megan Smead, who is with us this afternoon in person, as the new regional head of children's services at JMRL. Megan has been the Central Library's young adult librarian for the past year and a half. Prior to working at JMRL, Megan was the education manager at the Virginia Discovery Museum. And before moving to Charlottesville, she was a senior librarian in youth services at the Brooklyn Public Library and children's librarian at the Hampton Library in Bridgehampton, New York. So JMRL is very pleased to welcome Megan to the management team.
Welcome, Megan. Any other announcements from anybody? Okay, we'll move on to trustee continuing education. Abby Davis going to talk about starting and scaling passive programming for adults.
Okay, thank you, Abby, for coming today. Abby works in the reference department here as a reference librarian at the Central Library, and she has a brief presentation that she also put on at the Virginia Library Association's annual conference. So I am going to share screen and let Abby take this over.
Okay, hi. I assume you can hear me okay when I'm talking at this level. Okay, so my name is Abby Davis. I'm an adult programming and reference services librarian here at Central, and I'm talking about grab and go resources, also known as passive programming. So next one. This is a little bag that you all have in front of you, and the way I like to think about these bags is that they're small but mighty. So our mission is to connect people to information, ideas, and each other. Hi, come on in. Here's the bag. We're just started talking about the bags. Do you want to sit here? Oh, right here. Okay, great. No problem. Okay. So our mission is to connect people to information, ideas, and each other. And so these bags are filled with new ideas, new information for our patrons, and even ways to connect with other patrons. And I love these bags because I think they also tie into lifelong learning and growth. They are ways that people can grow and change, improve their quality of life, and just have meaningful experiences through these little bags. So we started them in January of this year, 2022, and we started out with mindfulness as a theme or a concept. And we are kind of moving along from there. So it's a new way for patrons to be engaged with our content, our resources, our services, and our traditional programming. Okay, next slide. I love these bags because I've been doing mindfulness, but the concept is really flexible. It can be pop culture, it can be sports, travel, history, local interests. You can put anything in this little bag. It's also great because of the COVID culture for patrons who are used to curbside pickup or the pickup lockers. Any sort of grab and go, this is great because they have an opportunity to engage with the library at home. I also enjoy that they're really accessible. So there's no registration or reservations required. We just put them out and patrons can take them, first come, first serve. It's especially important, I think, at our branch Central because we have a large unsheltered population that comes in each day, and they don't typically engage with us through our circulating materials or our traditional programming, but they do pick up these bags. They really like them. So that's a little bit about why this has worked for us so far. Okay. In the bag, it starts, the heart and soul of it are these little paper printed goodies. That's why they're so cost effective, because it's pretty much just paper in here. But when we did mindfulness, it's things like mantras, breathing techniques, self-care tips, journal prompts, empowerment bingo, you name it. It's fun things all on theme. I like to include 1 to 2 tangible items as well, even if it's something as simple as a sticker or like a piece of candy, because people feel like they're getting a real gift out of it. And then I always include at least 1 library item in there, so you're constantly bringing them back to the library and directing them to what else we have to offer. Advertising for upcoming programs, directing them to our online resources like our databases, even things like book lists can be on there, the QR code to our podcast episodes that are relevant. So we put the library in each bag. And then I have the books that I put in as well. Okay, thanks, David. So here's some more of what's in the bag. As you can see, some of this work is getting on Canva, which we use to design elements that are visually pleasing or aesthetically nice. And then some of the work involved is kind of facing the ocean of information that is the internet and curating it down to find the most relevant, important resources for our patrons, because that's really our job as information professionals, is see what's out there and make it manageable for our everyday patrons. So the other reason I wanted to put this slide up is my rubric for the bag. Like when people open up the bag and take things out, my hope is that it elicits a wow moment or an aha moment. Like, wow, I didn't know that. Or wow, that really helps me right now. I needed that. Because that's sort of kind of criteria when I think about it, it tells me that it's a high quality product. Okay. So far, we've been able to partner with a few community partners, and a few of the branches have been able to start this as well. The process looks different for the branches versus the outside partners. So the partners, I make the bags, I deliver it to them, and they're really more of a distribution center. So they hand the bags up to their own clientele, which I think is really important because we reach more diverse populations. It's the age-old question of how do we reach people who are not coming into our walls, our buildings. And then for the branches, I don't make the bags for them, but I have a Google Drive available for everything that I've created or that I've curated from the internet. So all branch staff have to do is print and cut and put them in the bag. So we're trying to minimize the workflow in that way. Obviously, the goal is just to continue expanding to more partners in that way. Okay, next week. I also really enjoy this initiative because it's a way to solicit contributions from community members, which is a win-win-win. So I primarily make everything in these bags. But when someone from the community is able to contribute something for the bag, it's a win for me because it's one less thing that I have to make or find. It's also a win for that content contributor because so many of these people are local artists, local business or local writers, local business people, local entrepreneurs. They're doing these self-help skills. And so they're able to put their website on there, their social media handles, their tags. So it's a way for them to grow their own audience, build their base, engage with the community. So it's a win for them. And it's also a win for our patrons because they're not just getting my angle or my narrative, my view on this topic. They're hearing from other people who are the real experts. So that's why I've been able to enjoy having contributions to the bag. This is a little bit of our quantitative data. We've given away over 800 bags this year through various branches and our various partner satellite locations, I would call them. So it's a balancing act of how many bags we want to make, basically. But the way I think about it is we've done over 800 bags so far. And theoretically, that's 800 little moments where someone's day is going to be brighter or better or hopefully improved. So it's also great because it's low cost per bag. So giving away all those bags is not breaking the bank because, as you can see, they're just humble little bags. They're pretty basic at their core. Mostly paper with just a few fun extras. We have gotten some really great feedback from the little survey. You guys all have bags. You'll get one in just a second. So you have, I encourage you to take it home, like look through it and enjoy it and fill out the feedback survey. If you have thoughts or ideas about the bag, people have said that it helps them stress less, organize their thoughts. It gives them ideas for how to do this kind of work for themselves. Some people say it sparks joy, and that's really fun, whimsical. So it's been really nice to get some good feedback. Okay. As David said, I did take this to BLA and I was able to present it in Norfolk this past month, which was a great experience for me. I had never presented before at a library conference. And so I was able to take this into a room of my peers, librarians all around the state, and talk about how they can do this program. And it doesn't have to be mindfulness. So many people are like, mindfulness, it's a buzzword, I'm over it. But like I said, you can do this for any topic. So it's just a concept that's very flexible. You can make it as deep or as wide or as big or as small as you want. So I knew that people would be excited about it. They really were. I got great feedback. And it was a wonderful experience for me to get to go to BLA in Norfolk. So what comes next is, as I said, new concepts, new ideas, new themes for the bags are what we're really interested in doing next. And I think what we're most interested in doing next is explore the world bags, where each bag is going to be about a different country, because it's a great way to direct our patrons back to so many cool library resources that we have going on right now. We have our transparent language learning database that is so much fun. I've used it personally. We have our new flavors of the world kits that have spices and recipes from around the world. And I put the couch because, of course, when you're talking about different countries, armchair travel, reading lists, books about those countries. So there are lots of ways that we can take these bags. It's been very sustainable. We've been doing it 11 months and have not really stopped doing it. So I'm here to just present this to you and answer any questions you have about how it's been going or anything along the lines of the bags. So, yes.
I saw that as a community, you work with Java. You work just locally, or you go out to other counties?
So far we've just done locally. It's the office. It has a preschool in it.
So it is
Yes, exactly. So far we've just been over there.
So you haven't tried other community centers throughout the region?
Yeah, no, it was just, if you want to go back to that list, that was the only list that we've gotten to so far. But what I found is that partners are they're interested in doing this because it's a low barrier to entry. Like when I call someone up and I say, hey, can I bring over 50 bags? You can give them away. they love it because they don't have to do the work of making the bags, getting bags. I put JMRL tagging on them when they're going out to a satellite location. And so it's a great, that's one way that I would like to continue to expand bags is to have more satellite locations. Yeah.
But I'm on the JAVA board of directors, and I like the reason. We have community center there.
Yeah.
And it looks like something that'd be good for those, particularly elderly folks in that
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
So I'd like to make contact with you soon, and maybe see if we can't work on
That sounds great.
I can help you with that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I'll put you in touch.
Awesome.
Yeah, actually, they, and James Library in Greene County, the library shares a building with Java right across the hall too, so it seems like a natural connection.
Can I ask maybe a similar question, but more generally, when you're, how do you go about identifying the community partners? Is it, you're based in Central, but I think part of what's behind the question here is we have 5 jurisdictions over a wide area. Are you working with perhaps branch managers in each location who might have more local knowledge of what those local partners at other jurisdictions are? Tell me, give me a little feel for that.
Sure. Can you go to the slide that has the graph of the quantitative? Yeah, so as you can see, I started handing them out to satellite locations or involving the branches just in June. So this has been relatively new, especially because September and October, I was preparing for BLA, so I didn't do a lot with the actual bags. I was preparing to present the bags. So it's relatively early in finding the community partners in the satellite locations, but we have our new liaison program where central reference staff, which I'm a part of, are paired with the branches. I'm actually paired with Louisa, so that's really fun. And I think the hope is that it will integrate central reference more with the other branches, so we'll be able to find, you know, to start maybe like 1 or 2 partners who are maybe interested in doing the bags. The question is, who's going to make the bags for each partner? Because like if it's a partner in Nelson or, you know, other counties, maybe I don't make all the bags, or maybe I do. I don't, we'll have to, you know, figuring out who's it, because that's the other thing is finding which staff are maybe interested in doing this little project. For me, I had a hard year in 2021, and this project has really brought me back to life. I have so much pride in it. It's just been very fun for me. So I think finding other staff who are interested in doing this kind of thing, because it's not just cutting paper, it's also doing the research of finding what goes in them and designing them. And so identifying other staff who want to kind of take it on with me from the other branches, then they can almost be like the bag lady. Yeah.
This is such a nice idea. Do you, when you send them out to partners, do you include anything like how do you get a library card or anything like that? That's
Yeah.
trying to get people to come back to the library.
Yeah, so when I send them out to the satellite locations, I do always have something JMRL themed in there. I don't necessarily put like how to get a library card because I try to keep it pretty on theme. So like these are mindfulness bags, so it would be more like we have a podcast, we have a library podcast. So some of our podcast episodes are about mindfulness topics. So it might be links to those or book lists about mindfulness things. Often it's a flyer for an upcoming program. Like we always have chair yoga. We always have like some things can be related to mindfulness, maybe even if it's not called mindfulness or wellness or health. So I try to, so far what I've been doing is I didn't want too much library, not spam, but too much library stuff in there just to overload it. And it's kind of a small bag. So folding the papers is not as maybe pleasing to the eye, but yeah, that's a great idea though. I mean, because something simple that's just general about the library, you know, it's always helpful. Yeah.
I have to commend you for this project because I heard you say the library downtown has a lot of people who come just for shelter, basically. And this right here is an incentive for them to do some other things. Also, I think that it reaches a diverse community. And I would suggest that maybe you get with your colleagues and maybe you all can make a little group that can help put them together.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel that all of us should go. But I think this is a wonderful idea and my hat goes on.
Yeah.
That's your self-care. And
I think that not putting a lot of library stuff in there is kind of good because then, you know, you let them think, oh, I can get that at the library. So it's not like I'm pushing the library, but you're opening them up and they are thinking, oh, I bet that book is in the library. Yeah, and so, you know, I think it's better for them to make that step. Exactly. Because it's fun, it's cute, you know, it's whimsical, but in another way, it's a serious way to show that the library is a conveyor of information and like truth, and that we pass along good, solid resources that are actually helpful to people's lives. So, yeah.
I was also interested in the content contributors, they're third parties, and I'm always interested, and I think you said that they have an opportunity to put their own website and branding and some of their own visibility. So I'm always interested when I hear about something like that, about the mix that's emerging from that. How did those contributors in our 5 jurisdiction region know about the opportunity to be represented and contribute to these bags? And how are we making sure that those contributors reflect the entire community rather than just sort of frequent library, you know, usual suspects, for lack of a better word. I think some people know what I'm talking about. Tell me about how people know about this opportunity.
Yeah, so I started by reaching out to people who have been presenters or vendors for us in the past. So like Holly does Qigong, and she had done a virtual Qigong program for me and was amazing. So I reached out to people like that who had done those programs and said, do you want to send me either a digital file or a little token to put in the bag? So that's where I started and got, again, a fair number of submissions, because people are reluctant to, like Holly, she came and did Qigong, it was great. I asked her if she would do it again, she said no, because it's a lot of time, you know, like to actually come do a program or even to do it virtually, to give of her time and energy was a lot, but she could share a file with me that I could then print as many times as I wanted that had Qigong information on it. So that was the first step. I also, on the feedback form, you'll see when you do the survey, there's a question that says, do you want to contribute something to the bag? And if so, put your contact information. So I've had people do that, and they have then been able to submit something for me for approval to be put into the bag. But as far as the breadth and depth of the service region, I think that's just going to come more with time as more people see it and see the feedback survey and kind of get a feel for the opportunity. And we continue to hopefully advertise it.
Abby, do you have an approval policy?
For what goes in there from outside contributors? At this time, no, because I look at it and I say, you know, is this something that either I would have made or that I could find on the internet? And so far, it's all done.
I would say that there's the overall guidance of the programs policy, you know,
Okay.
which has been very carefully worked on, and there's procedures associated with that. So nothing that would conflict with program policy would make it past that and make it into the bag.
Exactly. Thank you, David.
I think that's great, Abby. I've seen the bags around, you know, Crozet and Northside, and I love the idea of engaging these things. And, you know, you can pick up something that's not a book, that's not a movie, you know, that's not a CD, and has some ideas that get you thinking. I think it's a wonderful program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby. Thanks for taking the time to.
All right. Next up, we have committee appointments and reports, and the first is a report from the library name working group.
believe that's me, Tony. This group met on November 17th. Reviewed the results of a staff survey that went out on All Staff Training Day. Discussed takeaways from the public meeting that I mentioned last month with local experts from the University of Virginia, the Blue Ribbon Commission in Charlottesville, and the Albemarle County Public Schools. And the goal of the working group is to synthesize this information and present it to the full board early in 2023. That's my report from the library day work group.
Any comments or questions? Okay, thank you, David. And I suspect you're about to give the regional agreement review.
Yeah, and since Wendy's not here, I'm also gonna have to give her a budget committee. So settle in for a lot of the ribbon. So the regional agreement review committee is made up with one representative from each jurisdiction that partners in the Jefferson Madison Regional Library, and by the regional agreement, every 5 years it needs to be reviewed. This is one of the years for review. That group met on November 3rd. The jurisdictions had a few items that they were interested in discussing, and those included the hard number written into the regional agreement for insurance liability limits that JMRL is responsible for. So they asked me to go back and do some homework on that, and whether or not having a hard number in there is the best way to deal with that, is over time it needs to change. They were also interested in the fund balance carryover amounts. JMRL can carry over 5% of our general fund annually. Anything more than that needs to be given back to all 5 jurisdictions that participate in JMRL. So there was some discussion about that number and whether or not that was still sufficient now 10 years later. Similar to the first question, there was some discussion on flexibility in some of the hardwired dates for budget delivery. The dates are by January 15th, JMRL needs to deliver a budget to each jurisdiction. And by October 15th, we need to have a pre-budget meeting with all 5 jurisdictions. So every jurisdiction has a different budget cycle and a different budget schedule. The reality is that we always, the library always gets our budget in November, basically at the Thanksgiving meeting. So we're ahead of those schedules by a bit, but there were some questions to whether or not we should tweak those and make sure that they're reflective. Some wording that would say something like, well in advance of, or within more than 60 days in advance of the budget process for each jurisdiction, something like that. There was some discussion about regional representation on the library board. And then there was much discussion of the out variant fee that JMRL imposes on individuals that don't live in Charlottesville, Albemarle, or Nelson. So the representatives from each jurisdiction, we're going to take this discussion back to their home jurisdictions. The group is going to meet again on December 16th. At that point, they'll make a decision on whether to begin drafting amendments to address any of those issues or anything else that they would like to discuss, or to close the current review for 5 years until it gets reopened by the library or any of the 5 jurisdictions. Any questions on the Regional Agreement Review Committee?
What was that last thing after the regional representatives were taken back, and then you said something else there?
We're going to meet again as a group on December 16th. And at that point, there's going to be a decision. Well, do we want to pursue any of those items and try to write an amendment to the regional agreement? Or are we just going to call this agreement review done for this 5-year cycle?
What is that process of writing an amendment? And how does that affect the approval of the rest of the agreement?
Well, the agreement is already approved.
Right.
It's in place right now. So an amendment would need to go, it would need to be drafted by this body, not this body, the Regional Agreement Review Committee. And then it would go back to, I'm sure, since all of the representatives there were representatives of the executive branch of each jurisdiction, they would then take it back, and I'm sure each one would have their legal department look at them and whatnot. And eventually it would go to all 5 elected bodies for them to approve. So it would go to the Louisa Board of Supervisors and Charleston City Council, Nelson, Albemarle, Greens Board of Supervisors. If they were to then approve those amendments, then they would get added onto the regional agreement.
Okay.
Can you explain the fund carryover 5% limitation or distribution thing?
Yes, that's hard written into the current regional agreement that any amount that JMRL, so we take in funds from all 5 of our local jurisdictions, and going into the next budget year, we have to have spent at least 95% of those. If it's under 95%, then we need to give the amount up until 95% of it back to the jurisdictions. So if we spend over 5, if we don't spend over AJ, you gotta help me here. We have, if we have more than 5% of our operating budget in the bank, so to speak, at the end of the fiscal year, then we give it back by contract. We can't keep more than that, which is a good policy because it makes sure that we're being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars for all 5 jurisdictions. So we can't just hoard money and keep it there or whatnot. But one of the jurisdictions brought up that that number was low for a lot of their other partnerships. And so JMRL, I know, will be interested in raising it a little bit to try to help cover expenses, but it's up to the jurisdictions. Does that make sense? Not really.
Not really. I mean, it's, it's like in one pocket, out the other, you know, it's one of those shuffle things.
Well, we have given back funding. We gave funding back the first full year of COVID, when JMRL branches weren't fully open for the entire year. We didn't spend the entirety of our operational budget, so we had more than 5% left over at the end of the year, and we gave that back as a credit in the next year's budget for each jurisdiction. And you know, I can think of at least 2 other times in the last 20 years that JMRL has had over 5% left, and they gave it back to each government agency.
So if they have 7%, they give back 2%.
2%, yeah, exactly.
With the economic forecast, is it going to be wise to have that number changed and work on that at this point?
Well, I don't think that the change would go down. I think the discussion was having a higher ceiling so that JMRL could carry more over in its fund balance. But yes, it came up from at least one of the jurisdictions that when they are in budget discussions with outside agencies, the fund balance is frequently an issue that could cause discord between the agency and partners, because nobody wants to feel like they're taking their local tax dollars, giving it to this agency to present a service, but then that agency is hoarding it. And we certainly have no interest in doing that. We've been good financial stewards over the years. So the discussion would be what the right number should be for a fund balance. Like how much should the library be able to carry over? But
I think also that the 5% figure was, I won't say generated out of whole cloth, but it was just come up with as a sort of, let's try this in the initial regional agreement, if I remember my history correctly. So we've been working with this 5% for decades now. And as David says, there have been some years where we've had to turn money back. There's also been some years where we see we're going to come up to the 5% and we have expenditures, and we, with AJ's help and so forth, we're able to come in right at 5% so that we can do the carryover. So I think that it's not a bad idea to perhaps raise that a little bit. Might make everybody's life a little bit easier at the end of the year. But again, I do think that 5% was sort of a general rule that there may not have been a lot of history behind, other than we need a figure here, let's put in 5%.
And to Tony's point, JMRL has, when we have dipped into that fund balance, it has been for very specific things, like the current minimum wage adjustment plan, where this budget that we're going to talk about today is going to be entering year 2 of that. It's supplemented by the fund balance. So JMRL went back to the jurisdictions last year and said, hey, we need to raise our minimum salary. We're willing to dip into the reserve fund basically in order to get that to happen and scaffold it up over a few years. I can think of one other time too, when a last minute change in medical costs came up with a 6-figure increase in a budget for JMRL that hadn't gone through the entire budget process. So we had to dip back into the reserve fund in order to spend it, in order to make that work for our jurisdiction. Pretty soon our audit will be done, and you'll see those figures in the audit as well. When I say pretty soon, sometime in the next few months, the audit will be done. It's due into the state. It's due into the state by December 15th, but the last few years, our partners in this have it's been a little delayed. So.
Any other questions on the regional agreement and the review of same? No. Okay, thank you. Thank you, David. And next up, in preparation for our upcoming vote, is a budget committee report.
Okay, and I'll be doing this as well. Wendy sent me some notes. She unfortunately couldn't make it today. So the budget committee met week before last, I think also on the 17th of November, to discuss various scenarios, taking the suggestions from the personnel committee and incorporating them into a budget for fiscal year 24. The discussion was largely around whether or not to request 2 new part-time positions at the Northside Library, whether or not to include those in the request of the 10 change positions that the Personnel Committee sent forward. In the end, the Budget Committee, they had a very interesting conversation. I would recommend all of you go back and watch. It's posted online, and decided against that conversation. The other priorities we're looking at year 2 of said minimum wage adjustments, a 2% cost of living raise for staff, a 5% increase in healthcare costs. That's the most recent quote that the city of Charlottesville has given us. We're hoping that that number will come down, but that's the ceiling of how bad that increase can be for next year. An increase in defined benefit retirement costs, a sizable increase in the Northside Library's rent, and then other potential personnel requests, with the top priorities remaining what this board stated as the top priorities, which were a part-time position for the drive up at the Gordon Avenue Library and expansion of bookmobile services to include Nelson and Louisa County. So that was the decision that was made, and the budget that is in your handouts packet reflects the Budget Committee's proposed budget that they are recommending for this body.
Which takes us to, we'll have some discussion obviously about that, I believe, but we'll, moving on to new business. The first item is the vote on this proposed fiscal year 24 budget, but I would like to open the floor to comments and questions about priorities that the Budget Committee has decided on and what the rest of the board would like to do before we take a formal vote on moving the budget forward.
Well, I thought it was a very good conversation. Thank you very much to all of the board members who were there. That wasn't an easy call, but I think weighing all of the different options in front of us, this is our putting our best foot forward, I think.
I'm happy to answer any specific questions too about the proposed budget that's in your handouts, which I know everyone spent Thanksgiving week.
Did we get a new life insurance policy? It seems to be a
Yeah, great question, Meredith. So for years, JMRL has been using a figure per a person's salary to calculate what their life insurance expenses were. We got a new formula to use, which is slightly less. It had been around 1% of a person's salary towards life insurance. We got a tweaked figure, which was closer to 0.75%. So you'll see across the board that cost for life insurance went down. Unfortunately, that's not a huge expense, so it didn't save a ton of money, but it saved several $1,000 throughout the budget.
I'd like to also say that I think, again, this was a hard choice for the Budget Committee to come up with these priorities. I do think that it enables us to move forward. It's certainly not a level budget, and it's got some things in there that I think will be of real use to the community, like the part-time position in Gordon Avenue Library for the drive-up window and so forth. So again, I'd like to thank the Budget Committee for their work. I know this is not easy, Thomas, and I really appreciate it. Other questions or comments on the budget?
AJ pointed out to me that the handouts, can I share screen really quick, Tony?
Sure.
The handouts were missing something to do with the totals didn't print out. If you look at what we call the grid sheet, see the information at the top here did not print out for you. So I'm sharing with you what those percentages are. This is the 3-year average of circulation usage by each jurisdiction, and it's used to determine what the share of regional costs are for each jurisdiction. So when we get this posted, it'll be corrected. If you're on the Budget Committee, you already saw this, but something went wrong in the handouts. So the average over the last 3 years is 60.1% of checkouts have come from Alamo patrons, 23.88 Charlottesville, and then was there another important piece missing there?
Yeah, all the titles and totals from the entire budget.
Oh, that.
They are in alphabetical order. So the bottom line though, I think. Yeah, the bottom. Yes, the bottom line came across, except it doesn't say all this is out, Charles, so pretty Louisa and Nelson. Thank you, AJ, for pointing that out.
And then if you will, the 3 columns are. Those. It's actually proposed on 50.
So that would be 22 actual spent, the 23 budget that we're working in now, and what the proposal is for next year.
Got it.
So that front page, the bill line, is missing. That's the 6.8 is what we're proposing in at the bottom. Everything is missing.
Any specific questions about the process or any of the decisions the budget committee came to?
If not, we can move to a formal motion and then a vote. Again, once we approve this budget and take it to the jurisdictions, we can then meet with the jurisdictions after the first of the year to discuss the various pieces and parts of it with the administrative bodies that we represent. I always sort of feel like we're bundling this up and sending it off into the void, but that's not really the case. May I have a motion to accept the budget as the budget committee has put it forth?
I'll make that motion to accept the budget as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries and off it goes. Thank you, everybody. And especially thanks to the budget committee for all their work. And AJ, thanks for pulling all that together. And David, thanks for all those committee reports. Next up on the new business, adoption of the City of Charlottesville's shared leave category. This is indeed a piece of new business. David, I think this one is yours.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's me from here on.
It's been the David show.
It's been the day. So yes, the city of Charlottesville has adopted a new set of personnel policies, and JMRL, per the administrative services agreement with the city of Charlottesville, uses all of Charlottesville's personnel policies as our own, unless explicitly stated otherwise in either our policies or the employee handbook for JMRL. So one thing that we follow very closely has been their categories for leave, but JMRL has our own leave accrual policy, which we went through a few years ago. If you remember, we went through a big discussion for those who were on the board 2 years ago about what the accrual rate should be over time for employees, like how much to make after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatnot. So we do have some differentiation in leave policies, specifically when it comes to the accrual rate. But because of that differentiation, I wanted to point out this new shared leave category, which the city has, make sure that the board is aware of it and get your authorization to begin implementing it for their staff. So first off, this is not a leave bank, which is initially what I thought it was. Some of you might have come into contact with organizations who have a leave bank where people can donate leave and then it's there for people to pull on as needed. This is on an individual basis. It's meant as a short-term help. Anything longer than a short-term basis, which would be defined by myself and the HR, our administrative staff, would need to be referred to HR of the city for short and long-term disability. The goal here is to help people who have a need because of illness or illness in their family and have used up all of their accrued leave for JMRL to get them over until such time as they can get back to work, to help them manage that gap there so that they don't enter a leave without pay scenario if possible. This replaces on the city's end their emergency leave category. They had a category before that had some leave that was available based on years of service if there was an emergency situation for an employee, but it was little used and little understood and not as well defined as the new categories are. So we have been working in-house on a procedure. We are ready to go with this if the board approves it. I left up for you, I'm going to share screen again, the actual wording from the city's personnel policies. Hold on while I scroll through 20 pages of the budget.
Close my eyes.
It's like microfiche.
Oh. Hold on.
Have to do this in the
She'll
movies,
tell you when you can
Close
look.
my eyes, you know, when the train goes, I can.
So the eligible, so JMRL would adopt these, basically, these definitions, all benefits eligible employees are eligible to participate. Once they have exhausted all of their own accrued paid leave. It's not meant to be something where somebody is under workers' comp leave. And what it is that the city employee, in this case it would be the JMRL employee, may donate a portion of their vacation or sick leave to another eligible employee for the following reasons. And they all have to do with illness or illness in the family, or caring for a child, bonding leave. Military service as well is an option here. So what would happen is the employee would make a request to me and it would say, I need, I'm going to run out of leave for these reasons. I would require some documentation on that. If they meet all the criteria that are laid out here, I would put out a call to all staff to ask them if they would like to donate to this individual without getting into too many specifics about what their issue is. And then staff could donate leave in 4-hour segments. The reason that it's done that way is because leave is not, my leave is not the same as everybody else's leave. It's based on your rate of pay as well. So if I made, let's pretend I made $1,000 an hour, and let's pretend that Sierra made $500 an hour. Right? My 4 hours of leave is worth twice as much as her 4 hours of leave, so she would get to take more time based on that expenditure. I only pick those for using prop numbers. Okay. So they have a 2-page handout here in your handouts. The employee who's donating must have at least 2 weeks of full-time leave, sick leave specifically, in order to donate. So nobody could put themselves into a hole in order to help out their fellow employees, which I think is smart. It has to be in 4 hours, and all donations are strictly voluntary. They have their own process, but ours is modeled after theirs. The requests are valid for only 90 days, but they can be renewed as determined by myself, the director here. And shared leave is available for an additional 30 days following the last pay cycle in which donated hours were used. So it can't be carried over in perpetuity. It can only be carried over for a 30-day period. Okay, and then there's a note here, shared leave may not be eligible for retirement credit service hours. So the employees at JMRL that are on the defined contribution plan, the pension plan, they can use sick leave at the end of their term of service to count towards how long they have served. And if you donate some of that, it will count towards the length of time. This is a new thing. I'm hoping, knock on wood, that it won't come up too often. This is really only meant to be used to really help an employee out in a very difficult time. But it will come up, I'm sure. We have been requested in the past to have been requested by staff to have some sort of sick bank. This is not quite that, but it will meet some of the same requirements to help people out.
I have a bit of a question. If this is a 1-to-1 and not a bank, is it done on an as-needed basis?
Yes.
So if a person says, I think I'm going to need X number of hours over the next few weeks, and that requires more than one person donating hours, and not all of those hours get used, what's the return policy?
To return it to the employee who gave it.
If more than one employee has contributed to the pool that gets used for the person.
So they get selected on the first come, first serve. So the first responder down are the ones that will get used, which makes sense to me because otherwise, it'd be, because of the difference in rates of pay, it's the most fair way to say, like, we're going to take from employee A who got in first and said, yes, I want to give, and C. So go down the line until such time as they run out.
And you take an equal amount from each?
An equal amount from, well, no, the amount that the employee
has volunteered.
Okay. Yeah. So if the first person volunteered 20 hours and all 20 hours get used, we would move to the second person. If they volunteered 4, we would use 4. And it would go on down until either the employee is ready to come back to work or they have run out of
And if you needed 30 hours and the first employee volunteered 20 and the second employee volunteered 10 and only wound up needing 25, the remaining 5 go back to the second
They would go
employee
back to
who
the-
volunteered. Okay.
And if the employee is not ready to come back to work and they don't have enough time donated to cover it, then they'll go into a leave without pay situation.
Right, right. Okay,
But there's no holding this.
No, it's not a bank.
right.
It's on a one-to-one basis per request.
Why was the decision to make a policy like that rather than a bank? What's the benefit?
JMRL wasn't involved in the policy creation. This is a city of Charlotte policy.
Okay.
So I don't know. We use their leave categories though as our own. So I would hesitate to go off and create our own thing because we would need the support of Charlotte's HR if there were a problem. You know, and if we go back to them and say, hey, we've got this problem with this shared leave, and they say, but you're not doing it the way that we say to do it, then we lose our human resources support that we're contractually getting. Abby?
It's all anonymous, right? I mean, you had said you would send an email saying Abby needs leave. But
Yes,
wouldn't it be, one of your colleagues needs leave?
it would be the individual's name,
It would be you.
but not, yes, but not the, we clarified that. We clarified that with HR, it would be the individual employee's name, but not the circumstances.
And would I know who donated to me?
That's a great question that I don't know the answer to. Let me look that up and I'll get it back to you. So are there any concerns before Tony might ask you for a vote on this? Any issues with JMRL implementing this?
I'll say that the university has done this for many, many years. I've donated some leave over the years to various individuals. And it's worked very well. I think everyone's been very, very happy with it. So.
Tony, let me ask, based on that experience, how often do these requests come across your transom, so to speak? Is it, what's your pool size? Is it comparable to JMRL's 125, or is it much larger?
I mean, it's basically, you get contacted by human resources, and it's changed a little bit over the years, and because human resources has changed a little bit over the years and how they keep track of all these things. I would say that it's maybe once every 4 years.
Yeah.
And it's usually in the form of a request to a group. For instance, there's a colleague in this department going to need some leave. Would someone like to, help donate to this? And human resources really is in charge of doing all of the logistics. So publicizing it, getting the leave from the individual, granting it out, and doing the, whatever we want to call it at the end. Did they use it all? Was it, was it helpful type of thing? So I have to say, Mike, once every 4 years, probably at most. Come back.
But David, in this case, you would be
Yes,
organizing.
I anticipate that there will not be a tremendous amount of requests for it. Because JMRL does offer fairly generous leave, so it covers a lot of scenarios, but not every scenario. If it gets to be a burden, then we are looking at other options, short-term or long-term disability specifically.
Any other questions, comments about that? We have a vote to accept the new shared leave policy.
I think Mike has a question.
Well, just
Yeah.
on that subject of if it gets to be a burden, in your either city of Charlottesville's or your version, is there a threshold or is it defined in some way when that transition takes over that this is no longer an appropriate use of the shared leave mechanism? Is that defined or is that sort of your judgment? How does
I
that?
think it would end up being my judgment in consultation with the branch department, because that also having a person down is going to impact different branches and departments in different ways. If it's at Nelson where there's only, 5 employees, then being a person down for a long period of time might not be sustainable. Whereas if it's in a department that's got some more moving pieces, they might be good. So basically, Mike, the person would have to request it over and over again. There's not one request that stays open for a window of time. And if it's multiple requests, then we're going to need some documentation each time.
Okay. I can see some pitfalls of not having it defined, or I can see some pitfalls of trying to,
Get too tight.
be too inflexible, so.
How often would you have to review whether or not this is working for us?
Let's see what it said. There's a defined timeline,
It's valid for 90 days.
90 days. Yeah, so if that request doesn't, if it goes to the 90 days, and the employee finds that they need more, they would have to fill in another request. I would think 90 days would probably be. in
No,
most
no,
cases.
I'm not saying that as like HR, how it, they would say, oh, we've got 6 of these requests and it's just a lot, it's too much trouble.
Yeah, we can't do this anymore.
We can't do this. So is there a means where they review the feasibility of continuing to do this?
Yeah, I don't know, because this will be city HR,
Mhm.
JMRL's administrative team, so this is new for them as well. So I think we'll find out pretty quickly. If they get overwhelmed by this, then I'm gonna expect there will be some tweaks and better definitions and things like that. I think the intention is that it's only a stopgap in very specific scenarios. It's not meant to draw out.
Right.
If somebody needs serious time away for whatever the issue is, then
They need to go to.
we probably would be looking at other options.
And it would have to, my experience has been, it has to be a specific, I can't say, I have really bad headaches, so I'm gonna need 90 days off. It has to be something that states that your immediate family, or you have whatever it may be,
Serious.
and you need it. And it couldn't be like serious, you would have to say, my mother has terminal, whatever, and that would be the way it would be determined. So it's not like a candy ball and anybody can pick one thing out of it.
Yeah, we're gonna need very specific documentation.
Yeah,
But got to have a doctor.
yeah.
So just to be clear, as we talk about a motion of what we're voting on, this is not a board policy. It's a procedure that you're putting into place operationally. I assume it'll get the relevant aspects of it will get fed into the employee handbook, so people have their one-stop place to learn what they need to know. And you're asking us, similarly to how we've endorsed the employee handbook, you're asking us to just endorse moving forward with this operation.
Yes.
Okay.
And we've had to remove some things from the employee handbook based on the cities. We had to go through and change all the links because it linked to the old policy. But for instance, that emergency leave used to be in the employee handbook, and we
Right.
removed that because it's no longer an option. This would take the place of that.
The only thing that I see that I don't like, and I don't know how to explain it, is where it says has immediate family member as defined in section 8(4). I think maybe we worded who the immediate family is.
It is, I think A4 is the bereavement leave, I believe.
Yeah,
And that is defined in our employee handbook. So in our handbook, we can say as defined.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And put out the word.
okay.
We can't make any changes to the city's policy, but in our own employee handbook, we can specifically state what the immediate family is.
Yeah, I think that's.
Okay, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
It looks to me like that's maybe not just even defining who the immediate family is, but also the eligibility of illnesses for the immediate family. Like you were saying earlier, what was that?
I'd have to look back and
Okay.
and check.
Sometimes you may not want to do that.
I know.
And the reason I say that is because given the climate of our country now, and some people have mental illnesses, I don't think that we should dive in that deep. Just not, because I mean, it's a sticky situation. If somebody
agree.
has a nervous breakdown, you have to.
Are we ready to take a vote?
So if we're ready, I'll move that we endorse staff's implementation of the shared leave policy along the lines of the Charlottesville's new HR policies.
All those in
One
favor,
word that I said wrong. The shared leave, the JMRL shared leave procedure, I think I might have said the word policy, along the lines of Charlottesville's HR policy.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And it carries. Thank you. I can't imagine he has anything left to say, but it's time for the library director's report.
I think there's also the old business about the central CIP.
Sorry. Yes, you're right. Central Library Capital Improvement Program discussion. Pardon me. Excuse me. David,
This is,
I think this is yours.
this is also, I also want to thank the board for making that vote on the shared leave policy. I know that, hopefully it won't come up too often, but when staff need it, they really need it. So I'm sure that will be so this came up rather quickly where JMRL got a suggestion from our liaison at the city of Charlottesville. We're working on the CIP input for the central library project that that Tony specifically drafted a letter that goes to the Charlottesville City Council, the Albemarle Board of Supervisors, describing the need and going through some of the history of the central library renovation project. Because that happened quickly and both the city and the county are working on their capital improvement programs now, Tony worked on that and sent it around for you all to take a look at and sent it to all those two jurisdictions. We heard back from a couple members of city council who got a little bit of feedback. They were mostly interested in what the current costs were because the design study that I attached is now 7 years old, I believe. So we all know that the inflation rate is not going to be the same as it was 7 years ago. So JMRL has put an escalator of about a 10% increase every year in the request that we submit to the city and the county. We have submitted this project on both ends for decades, but the process has changed quite a few times. The goal here was to have both jurisdictions looking at this and talking about it at the same time. So we go through the city's avenues, and we go through the county's avenues, and those tend to, every few years, they change, just to make sure that they're aware that this is a joint 50-50 project between these two jurisdictions. The city's submission for the CIP is already in, the county's is due this week. Along a similar line, the city is putting together a committee to discuss basically the future of the downtown mall in the next 50 years, and JMRL have applied to have a representative on that as well to talk about how the central library is a hub in this area. So I'm mostly, Tony wanted that on the agenda, I think. Don't let me speak for you, Tony, because that letter went out and you might get some feedback, and so just a chance here to discuss anything that was in there or any process that JMRL is going through right now. Is there any questions?
Yeah, as you all know, I mean, this has been on our agenda for 20 years now, and we keep trying to put it forward. And I think this is a good opportunity to elevate it really beyond the always on the agenda, never get done, to a full project for both jurisdictions that they're aware of, that they can then, hear input from us, hear input from citizens about, is this a good idea? And maybe get a little more traction going here. So
I think this is really well written. Thank you very much, Tony.
thank David.
Thank you, David.
Any other discussion about that? Okay. Library director's report.
Okay. Since we're not at Northside this month, you likely didn't notice, but the Northside elevator is now on to month 5 of being out of service. It's the only elevator in the building. The building meets code for handicap accessibility because of the few parking spots out front, but it has been a tremendous detriment for library service to not have that elevator. And there are parents trying to get into story time with strollers. There are people with mobility issues, so not just people that need a handicap parking spot, but people who have trouble walking long distances, and then that's a long flight of stairs there. So we've been working very closely with Albemarle County on this. It is an Albemarle County-owned building. As part of our lease, the county is responsible for the providing and maintaining the elevator service. They are waiting on a chip for a circuit board. They got fried in a lightning strike in the summer. They got one that came in because of the supply chain. They were waiting for the new chip to come in. It didn't work. And in fact, it made the situation worse. It used to be just the call button, and now it's not going up and down at all. So they're waiting for an entirely new circuit board there. I'm working with county facility staff and Northside staff to change the signage out front to make all the spots that are directly in front of the library kind of mobility friendly spots. So even the non-handicapped specific ones will have signage that says, please reserve this space for people with mobility issues, strollers, things like that. Those should be going in the next few weeks. I know temperature of staff is at a boiling point over this issue, and I can feel it boiling over from the public as well. The Northside staff has fielded complaints pretty consistently for 5 months. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some complaints start to rise to your level at this point. I got an email from the Alcohol Board of Supervisors yesterday in which a patron had complained to them about it, which is the appropriate place to go because it's ultimately the county's responsibility of local partners in providing the service. So we work together on it. Anyway, I wanted you to be aware of that. I knew you were aware that it's out there, but that it has been out for such a long time and that the end is not really in sight either. And we're looking at other things that we can do to help relieve some situation there. So I wanted to make sure you're all aware in case you get a call about it. A couple of things I wanted to report on. JMRL made a change along with our colleagues in the Southwest Virginia Overdrive Consortium, which is not really Southwest Virginia anymore because Portsmouth joined recently. So it's basically, it's a big consortium. To move the digital magazines into our own Libby Overdrive service. So they used to be in an app called Zinio, and you log in through JMRL card. Then the state took over and got a statewide access to this that you needed a state of Virginia library card for, which you could apply for online. But we didn't duplicate that service for the longest time. We told our patrons, here's how you get a state of Virginia library card. Here's how you get these digital magazines, which is a complicated procedure. The state cut this service coming into this year and they were moving to another provider. And we made the decision because of the rise in state aid to go ahead and add those magazines into JMRL's collection and the rest of the consortiums as well. So kudos to Meredith Dickens for spearheading this. She's the administrative head of that consortium as well. She convinced the rest of the libraries that it was a good deal and good for their patrons. So it's not JMRL eating the whole cost, it was spread across all the libraries involved. We have seen double the circulation in the first month from any other state that had from any other month that had the state's collection. So in September of 2022, we had 762 checkouts from the state library. In October, we had over 1,400 in JMRL. So they're just much more discoverable, easier to find. And I encourage any of you that uses a tablet for anything to check them out because you can get very popular magazines and swipe through and read them. For comparison, in October of last year, which was the first month the magazines were in the state collection, there were only about 500 checkouts. So for October of this year, it's 46 checkouts a day. It's up to 52 a day in November. So we're seeing a lot of growth in that. Another nice thing about it is that it is simultaneous use, not like a lot of the other digital content that we have. So you and I, Mike and I could both check out the same issue of Us Legally at the same time. There's not, I have to pay for it. So JMRL offers access to over 4,000 magazine titles from around the world. And the last 2 months, our readers have accessed issues from 646 titles in 9 different languages too. English, Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, French, Danish, Portuguese, and Korean. So it's a neat service to be able to offer. There are no wait lists, as I mentioned, and the most recent issue, along with several years of back issues, are available. So this is just a nice service to share with anybody that you know in your life as well that's using a tablet for reading things. I'd like to report on the final food drive numbers spearheaded by Brittany Eversberg again this year. This year, 1,927 pounds of food were donated for collections that JMRL got. Almost all of those went to the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. About 350 pounds of that went to the Louisa Resource Council, which is where the food that was collected at Louisa was going. So that's almost a ton of food that was collected a month prior to last week, basically. And finally, I'm hoping all of you have seen the monthly newsletter that JMRL has been putting out this calendar year. So it started earlier in 2022. Jennifer McAdam Miller, our PR specialist, this is her initiative that she's worked on. This fiscal year, over 10,000 patrons have opened this newsletter every month for an average open rate of about 45%. It's growing too. We culled the list that we had a little bit. There were some There were some email addresses on there that were for cards that were no longer in use. And has generated thousands of clicks on other JMRL resources and offerings linked in the newsletter. So like I described, putting something into the bag that leads somebody to another resource. We've got proof of thousands of jump throughs where somebody saw something in the newsletter that they wanted to see what JMRL was offering. And on a monthly basis, JMRL receives positive feedback in response to this newsletter, frequently along the lines of, I never knew the library offered X service, whatever it was that was described there. So thanks to Jennifer basically for the hard work in collecting all that information and getting it out each month. But I think it's been a very good tool for JMRL to get out there and let the public know what kind of services are being offered in all 8 locations.
And do you know where that's advertised or how people are hearing about it to initially sign up?
I think at this point we have, when you get a new card, we have an opt-in option there. You can say, yes, alert me to news about the library. The first sign that we did, we took people who had used our previous newsletter from a different vendor that wasn't quite as, it was like a PDF that went up. We used those, so we had a bank in there already. And then I believe you can sign up on our webpage. I couldn't point to where right this second.
I think all the trustees just got signed up.
I think I signed all the trustees. Tony, that's all I have to report.
Oh, Tony, you're on mute there.
Yeah, we go. Okay. I think the dog has stopped barking. Mike, I don't know how you sign up, but I get 2 copies every month. So if you want one of mine, I'm happy to give it to you. All right. Other matters the board would like to raise. Going once, going twice. All right. So future agenda items. David, what do we have coming up for December? And remember, let's remember December is an earlier meeting, please.
Yeah, thank you. So December's meeting is going to be on the 19th. It's a week early because of Christmas. It's going to be back at Northside. So you will get likely 100 emails from me reminding everybody about the date.
Today I didn't even open mine and
Okay.
I think I'm just.
I believe there should be a policy committee meeting before that meeting. Mike, we're still on, so we should have a policy committee report.
All right.
We'll have a budget update this week. I'll send out the proposed budget that you all adopted today to our 5 jurisdictional partners. So I'll be able to provide any immediate feedback that we get.
Okay. Maybe we'll get some feedback on the central library from jurisdictions. Don't know. We'll see. Other items. If we're back at Northside, we might have some public comments. Okay. All right. If nothing else, I will be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm not even going to ask for nays. And there is a optional tour of the Central Library, I believe, to follow this meeting. Is that correct, David?
That's true. Yeah, Krista has volunteered to give a tour of the Central Library for anyone interested.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you.